Hello and welcome to 1 Degree Shifts. I'm Pascal, your host, and I'm the co-founder of Nectara. My guest today is Adam Aronovich. He's a medical anthropologist and the curator of Healing from Healing, the Instagram account that collects the strangest, funniest, and sometimes wisest corners of healing culture. He spent years working at the Temple of Way of the Light in the Peruvian Amazon, and he wrote his doctoral dissertation with humor at its center. We talk about why laughter works where critique fails, why a joke can keep a powerful experience from hardening into certainty. We meet Janice, the account's mascot, who is both the person fake crying on camera for likes and the person laughing at the video from the other side of the screen. We follow the pipeline from wellness into conspiracy thinking and how COVID cracked it all open. And Adam shares what his years of research in the Amazon actually found. It was never really the ayahuasca, it was the circle. The sharing, the being witnessed, the thing most of us lost without knowing we'd lost it. We close on hope as a daily practice and what's kept him from going cynical after years of cataloging the absurd. This one made me laugh, and it also made me think. Here's my conversation with Adam Aronovich. Hello, Adam. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's a real pleasure. I'm a big fan. I open Instagram sometimes, most of the time, just to see your account, Healing from Healing. So thanks you for all the laughs and all the reflections and the amount of work you put into collecting these things. It's really amazing.
Yeah, my pleasure. I mean, it's really crowdsourced. Most of the stuff is, collective work. Everything is sent to my inbox, and then I just sort of curate it.
Mm-hmm. For a while there, I thought you were scanning the internet to find all these things.
No, I mean, my mental health wouldn't be ideal if I did that. I mean, in the beginning, it was mostly kind of like just finding one meme or two memes and maybe making a text, but then people just sending stuff to my inbox, and it started making more sense to crowdsource the account, kind of like just make it a reflection not only of my own work, but something that's kind of like just channeling it through a collective effort, and then putting it out as some sort of curation as opposed to just my own.
So I'm really curious about the person underneath this account and you as an anthropologist and as a very intelligent person based on what I've read from you. You've done a lot of field work. You're an anthropologist. You actually worked at a respected retreat, Temple of the Way of Light, for quite a number of years. I'm curious to hear from you. When did you decide that your work needed to be funny and public instead of serious and academic?
I mean, it's always been a part of my life, even when I'm writing papers or even when I wrote my doctoral dissertation. The agreement that I had with my thesis directors was that it was going to be a piece of ethnographic literature that had humor as a centerpiece for it. I mean, it wasn't like a condition, but it was kind of like the thing that I wanted to do from the beginning. And luckily, I had directors and mentors who were very much on board with that idea. So everything that I've written, pretty much even in academic circles, has humor as a central component. Even when I facilitated retreats or experiences and so on, or worked in a more supportive capacity, funny has always been a flavor of it. But humor, for me, is the lifeline. It's what makes criticism not only bearable, but also, I guess, digestible in many ways, right? Like, at least for me, I know that when criticism or any sort of confrontation comes coated with good humor, which has always been the main, I guess, power of satire, for example, as a political force to bring, discord and friction into the public, but with a sense of humor that is easy to assimilate or easier to digest, and not only creating that sense of confrontation, but also the laughter kind of softens the impact and makes it more easily digestible.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially in this age of echo chambers, especially on social media, I think a lot of the critique that we share sometimes goes back to people who already agree with that critique. And so it kind of becomes this echo chamber where nothing actually gets done or nothing gets changed or the reflections are the same all the time. So you're kind of just critiquing to people who already understand this critique. Why do you think humor is so powerful to kind of transcend our stuff as humans? Like, why do you think it's so powerful?
Well, I think there's all sorts of different angles for it. I think from my perspective, the absurdity of everything.
The spectacle, I think you called it, right? The spectacle of the healing space and social media, right? You called it that word, and I really like that word.
I mean, I'm talking about life in general, but yes, if we're talking about the more niche bubble of healing culture, and particularly as it's filtered through the lenses of social media, which is what healing from healing is, but as the things started evolving, I realized that healing from healing wasn't really a reflection of healing culture as it is, but a reflection of healing culture as filtered through the lenses of social media. By the end of the day, it's kind of like I sometimes call it an ethnographic collection of healing culture material, specifically within the media of short form content, right? Really
Yeah.
a reflection of healing culture as it exists in the world, but as very specifically as filtered through the different lenses of, as churned into these kind of like tidbits of short form content. That in the end, I mean, nowadays it is a very big, important part of healing culture. I mean, it's impossible to separate anymore, let's say, the virtual and the real. But yeah, I mean, to your question, how does humor come into the question? When I think, particularly with healing culture, I think there can be a tendency towards solemnity and seriousness in ways that don't necessarily reflect the absurdity of the big joke or the cosmic joke that we're dealing with in the end. I mean, this is a big topic, I think, but we're mostly, a central component of healing culture, obviously. Maybe later we can talk a little bit on what healing culture is, which is not something that I take for granted that people understand what I mean when I say healing culture. But a big component, kind of like contemporary healing culture, includes within it very, very much so the psychedelic component, right? Like the psychedelic scenes, the various contemporary movements, scenes that draw back into different psychedelic uses as core components of these subcultures. And I think particularly when we're dealing with psychedelics, there is a tendency to take it to all sorts of different directions, like the psychedelic experiences or the insights that we can derive from the psychedelic experiences oftentimes have this kind of like numinous quality, like this very serious numinous quality that can derive in then all sorts of different belief systems, for example. And like when these belief systems crystallize, people can take it very seriously. I think this is where a lot of religious sentiments, for example, emerge from, or culty kind of like environments emerge from, when there's some sort of like very numinous insight, like this very numinous thing that feels truer than true. And then people take that as a truth with a capital T, and then that crystallizes into some sort of thing. And I think humor kind of like challenges these sorts of outcomes a lot. It keeps people maybe double thinking, like, oh, wait, maybe that experience felt very, very real to me, and that insight feels extremely real to me, but maybe there's something that I haven't really considered about how much certainty can I really invest into that particular belief or into that particular experience. And I think humor, that's for me what creates kind of like that distance between the experience and the crystallization of some sort of belief, which is certainty, right? Like we can have an incredible experience that is, again, like numinous and powerful and true and so on and so forth. But then if we put a little bit of humor in between, then that can provide that buffer between that experience becoming important and personal and so on, but not necessarily crystallizing into some sort of fundamentalist or religious or anything that needs that amount of maybe unearned certainty that can become then dangerous, not only for the individual and their own trajectory, but in a collective sense, right? Like the emergence of cults and sects and all sorts of dangerous or at least less than ideal directions. I don't know if that answers anything of what you wanted to ask.
Totally, it does. Yeah, I mean, religious certainty that you shared in the account, like mermaids and Atlantis, and different ways of people developing these techniques or practices or ways of being that are completely out of the norms. And a lot of them were probably sourced from a psychedelic experience, and they kind of dive right into that. And the Paladinians and all that stuff as well. Because I've heard a lot over the last years around different types of beliefs that are really out there. You've really helped illuminate some of them through the account. And one of the images you mentioned in one of the interviews you did was the integration coach that was fake crying in his car and filming it and posting it. Why do you think humor lands that point much better than just speaking directly to it?
Well, I mean, I think humor illuminates the absurdity of it, right? Like, for example, when we get too absorbed into the attention economy. I mean, again, like we're talking about healing culture, we're mostly talking about the attention economy, which is the overarching system within which social media is ruled. And I think when we get too absorbed into the attention economy, it's easy to lose track of the absurdity of it all, right? And then people do have, I include myself in this, I'm not exempt from this, but as creators or curators or people who are engaged in social media, we are captured very easily by the incentives of the attention economy, the dopamine hits, the likes, the whole engagement trap. And it becomes easy to kind of like lose track of what's important, like really important to say, and what's actually viral or what's going to be. I think, for example, for coaches or for people who are in this world of like, I have a lot of empathy for this. Like something that I oftentimes go back to in the page is like, we're not making fun of people. We're illuminating shadows that address all of us, right? Like this is a collective thing that through individual examples, we're trying to make sense of a collective phenomenon. So you're not making fun of that particular people. We're kind of like using that as an example to try to see the deeper structures that are creating this kind of phenomena. So for example, when I see coaches who are supposed to be helping people, at least modeling behaviors or modeling ways of being in the world that are supposed to be adaptive, and then I see them kind of like modeling the opposite, like this faux authenticity, right? Viral engagement, viral authenticity that is more for engagement than anything, because we know now, now we know that the attention economy very much likes strong emotions, right? Like it likes people like connecting emotionally. Rage and anger are the primary one. Rage bait is the bread and butter of the attention economy. But when you have like that fake authenticity where a person is kind of like modeling the way in which they're having a very important spiritual experience, a very deep emotional thing, and then they have to stop whatever the experience they're having to set up the camera and to set up the whole thing, and then kind of like recreate the crying. And sometimes I don't think that people realize that there's a performance behind this all. You're like, oh, you're so brave and you're so courageous and it is so beautiful. And if it was really so beautiful and if the person was really invested in experiencing the experience that they're supposed to experience, I really doubt. If that person is really grieving so deeply, I doubt that they would have the mental capacity. Or
I'm so sad.
Right. So, it's absurd. And I don't think that people oftentimes realize the degree in which many of these tidbits of content are absurd. Some of them are absurd in a very in-your-face kind of way, such as these fake performances of authenticity or emotion that are meant to just kind of provide, like, look, like I'm very authentic. I'm very authentic. I'm sharing with you these deeper things. Content is absurd in all sorts of different ways that are not necessarily self-evident. And I think as we kind of like co-create project of creating this museum of ethnographic tidbits of performative healing culture, then it becomes easier to kind of identify like, hey, like what are the things that are really there for the benefit of furthering a shared collective project of spiritual growth, of liberation, whatever it is that we're working towards, and what is just kind of like, just feeding this machine of attention grabbing, devouring thing that is not really furthering anything other than like our own social media growth is what attention economy provides.
I really feel like it's a bit of an absurd world that we live in, and increasingly so. Ever since COVID, it feels like something broke in the matrix or something. Everything's kind of become a little bit weirder. And sometimes I catch myself talking to my wife, and we're like, this is really strange, what's been happening. And increasingly so, it feels like the absurd. And if you've seen any Black Mirror episode, you know what I'm talking about. It's like the guy's obviously like seeing in the future, because that's in some ways where we're headed in some areas of our world, and social media being just an extreme example of that, in my opinion. But you created a character called Janice. Janice is kind of a mascot of Healing from Healing, and she likes the page and she follows it. And you say she's a slightly distorted mirror of the follower and also of you. So can you tell us a bit more about Janice? Because I actually read about this morning, and I thought that was really interesting.
I guess Healing, the way that I look at it, is not necessarily a page that pits a group of people against a different group of people. It's not like the way that I see Janice is that Janice is the person in the video, kind of like fake crying in the car and filming herself doing and posting it for likes and engagement. But Janice is also the person who is looking at the video from the other side of the screen and realizing how absurd it is and laughing about it and commenting on it. And like Janice is both of them. And I think most of the followers of the page play that role, because there's not a very sharp separation between actor and observer, right? Like we're all interchanging all the time. Like I can very easily find myself on the other side of the screen. If I was to post kind of something that to me feels authentic and real, but then other person will be like, oh, like that's just so cringe and so on and so forth. So like the cringe is not, it's not a divide, it's not a sharp divide between the cringe and the observer of the cringe or whatever. And I mean, if you go to the galleries, there's a mix of all sorts of things. There's things that are very obviously there because they're
very cute cats.
yeah, I mean, there's things that evoke, like, there's also a lot of sincerity. There's a lot of clips or a lot of memes that people choose. So each gallery that I post is a mixture of everything. And one thing that I did from the very beginning is that I'm not presenting these things with a moral judgment or with a, I mean, I'm not the critic telling you what these things mean. That's open for interpretation. And each gallery, there's always going to be people that comment, like, oh, like that person like shouldn't be there. That person is not necessarily there because I think that is ridiculous. Some of the things that I put there is because I genuinely think that they're very wise and important and insightful and so on and so forth. And there's always going to be about pretty much every video different takes and opinions and so on and so forth. So the whole point precisely is that it provides that sort of mirror that there's like a Rorschach test in many ways that people can project into the galleries whatever it is that they see. And sometimes they will see the absurd, sometimes they will see the ridiculous, sometimes they will see the cringe, sometimes they will see the shadow of their own behavior and so on and so forth, but sometimes they will find the wisdom that they were needing in that particular moment. And yes, oftentimes there's also just cute animals and cats, because what else is they for if not cute videos of animals?
Yeah, it's so true too. There's a lot of mirroring going on in what you're posting, and sometimes you'll find yourself on one side or the other. And what I find myself when I look at the account is part of that both, because we are part of this matrix and this attention economy that you mentioned. And we're always kind of playing a little bit of those roles as well, in terms of like trying to get more reach or trying to get more business or trying to get more this and more that. So there's a performative aspect to society that I find that, you know, it's hard to escape these days. If you want to have a business online, is you have to perform in some ways. There's this whole content planning machine going on. You have to keep posting, keep trying to find something insightful. And now with AI, it's so available to just, I want to post this really insightful thing. And so generate. And so the generation of these things and these models, the way they're being trained, we're also being trained on all the slop that's being generated. And so we're kind of like building this whole echo chamber of insights and wisdom that's just kind of being rehashed all over the place. What do you feel about AI in general? And how's that changed for you in the last few years?
Man, I mean, this is so new. I have very strong opinions about certain things. My opinions have changed over the course of the last 3-4 years. In the beginning, I was very excited. Like when I started, I could probably track my attitude towards generative AI through the account as well. Because I mean, if I go back like maybe 2 years, I used to post a lot of things that I did with the earlier version of Midjourney, for example, right? Like all of this kind of like generate a convention of coaches, and then like letting go, well, make it more coaches,
I remember
coaching more
those.
coaches, and those were incredible. I mean, people love those things, right? Like they were mega viral, like hundreds of thousands of shares and views, and they were funny because they were really a great way to visualize certain aspects of these cultures that were difficult to put into words, which generative AI kind of gave you kind of like these absurd creations of, and it was great. But I did that for a while, and then as time went by, every time that I did that, there were maybe a few people who were protesting, right? Like, oh, like I didn't expect this account to engage with AI. And then I started kind of going deeper into the actual, I mean, that's something that I was kind of really interested in, like the moral, ethical part of generative AI and kind of like more the existential risks of we're actually building with those AGI models and so on and so forth. I fought people, right, in the comments. I was like, hey, if you don't like it, like I like it. So, and I kind of like, I mean, I don't fight people in the comments anymore at all. I used to at some point, kind of like take it more personal. Nowadays, I'm very detached from the outcomes of the things. But I did kind of like see that there was a slow, very steady reaction against the use of AI. And nowadays, I mean, if today I posted kind of like a post that was kind of AI generated,
the lions will come get you.
Yeah, and I wouldn't either, because I don't think that it's, do I think that it's horrible? And yes, in many ways. I do use Claude. I don't use Claude for specific things. Like I would never use it to write my own stuff, for example. I think that's not only lazy, but actually very detrimental to my abilities, qualities, and potential development as a better writer. If I started using Claude to write things, I do feel very strongly about the writers, for example, who use Claude for writing. I mean, I think that there's certain gray areas, like if you want to use a language model to develop a structure for an idea, something that doesn't necessarily reflect immediately in the syntax and grammar that you're using. I think there may be steps that can be taken by a writer that don't immediately cancel the whole thing. But as a writer, as an artist, as a person who I use my own mind to convey ideas, to put out words that can like paint, describe a inner world, to use a language model for it would be self-defeating.
Yeah.
That also applies to many of the ways that humans choose to put out. I mean, you can see it nowadays with, like you said, like the slop. Like we're swimming in slop. Everything is slop. Everywhere that you look.
Yeah.
There's a few friends and creators that work with AI that I appreciate very much what they do. I mean, I'm not gonna share like right now names or anything, but people who like really use AI to create media that is insightful, that is powerful, that is, there's something about it that I see it and like I can't shake like this slop, like the sloppiness of it,
Yeah.
and there's something about human creativity that I think is a tragedy, like the overuse of, like the proliferation of slop as as an anthropologist, a person who appreciates the humanities. I think that there's this optimistic side of me that says, if really humanity was the best that it can be, and we were using these tools in the best way that we could, and we were using this incredible machinery of artificial intelligence to build systems and create the sort of mechanisms that would free us from menial work so we can all focus on,
Yes.
like you're running in the fields and making love
Doing
and
art.
but we know that's not the case. We know that the structures that are in place in the moment are working exactly in the opposite direction, that AI is going to be more, and it's already being implemented towards genocide, it's being implemented towards mass destruction, it's being implemented towards war, it's going to be more implemented towards policing, and so forth. So, there is kind of like that sense of like, we in a different reality where humans were, I don't know what is the differential there that could flip the thing between utopia and dystopia, but the way that we're heading is definitely towards dystopia, and I think the way that AI is advancing is going to make that dystopia faster and closer and so on. There is that element of fate or hope or wishful thinking that I do think that it's a powerful tool. I'm not going to completely push it aside, even though I understand the huge cost that is having in every possible parameter for humanity as a whole.
There's people generating hundreds of podcast episodes with AI, and it's just ridiculous, like how much they can produce. And I'm not an AI, I'm a real person. And I think that humanness and that quality of being real and being relational with each other is exactly where I feel like we should be going. But like doubling and tripling down on that is to be highly human together and just leverage AI as a tool for the human flourishing. And I think that's not really where we're going, but hopefully in a couple of years from now, people have crossed that Rubicon of thinking AI is the savior of the world, and we can kind of get down to work and fixing our systems.
I think there's going to be a rebound. I think this is already happening.
People protesting everywhere around AI data centers.
Not only protesting, but unplugging. I think there's going to be a point in time, I think it's already happening with the younger generations, where people are just not going to stop participating in this slop machinery, because I think people realize there's no quality in the interactions. There's no substance to the. It's kind of like like the simile of going to a restaurant, being really hungry and wanting to eat food, but all you have is the menu, right? Like the map is not the territory, kind of thing. And I think with AI, that's kind of like what it's giving us all of these menus, all of these territories that we can't really inhabit. And I think people are there's going to be a massive rebound where authenticity, like real authenticity, not the kind of authenticity that is modeled through engagement Skinner boxes on the internet, but like real authenticity, like going out, like unplugging and hanging out, and just like this sort of matrix kind of thing where you can like just unplug from the machine and you live in this world where that illusion of the juicy steak disappears, but then you're happier, at least because it's authentic, it's real. And I think as an anthropologist, as a person who values the humanities, as a person who really values the arts and quality of human creation, I think there's going to be a moment where these things that right now are kind of like not the most highly valued in the market as a whole are going to rebound, because people are just going to be hungry and thirsty for real thoughts and real art and something that is not slop. And like sorting through the slop is going to be so difficult that people are going to just kind of give out with give way.
The slop is going to be trained on the slop, right? So that's called like the shitification of the AI model. So we'll see how they navigate that stuff. But it's
Everything is going to be
definitely
so
increasing.
thoroughly shitified that the only way out is going to be to go back to the basics.
Yeah.
Maybe people are going to be putting their hands on the rocks in caves again, like discovering all the arts
The
from
senses.
like
Yeah.
that meme, like the kids are discovering, rock painting from first principles after they churn out all this slop, and once again we're doing petroglyphs in the savannas of whatever.
Yeah.
I think that's a very good assessment of probably what's going to happen in some ways, that we're
Mhm.
just going to value again that
Yeah, well,
quality
at
of
least
human.
during this time, the shareholders will have made a lot of money, right? So maybe that will cross that line as well around,
We're
the
maybe going to
sucking
just
up
be,
of power at the
yeah,
top.
we're going to be making petroglyphs from concentration camps or something, but Viktor Frankl, who kind of gave that assessment from the depths of despair in an extermination camp where there wasn't a glimmer of hope. And he said, like, the persons standing in line towards extermination in the Nazi camps and the people who were able to retain a sliver of humanity were the people who were able to find humor in it, right? Like the people who were able to,
Mhm.
even in the line to the gas chambers, to make a joke about it, right? People
Yeah.
who were, yeah. So I think,
Yeah.
that's probably the best and most timeless assessment of what humor eventually
Yeah.
is.
Let's talk a bit about the turbulent part of some, like I mentioned earlier, I feel like around COVID time, like things started to kind of fracture and break and things got really weird. And my circle of friends, definitely things got a little bit weird sometimes.
Yeah.
And you've talked about before epistemic malware, which is this idea of like someone being in a very vulnerable state, especially after or during a psychedelic experience.
Yeah.
As I'd like to talk a bit more about that pipeline, sort of the wellness to populism and like wellness to fascism. A lot of people in the space don't really believe that those roads are connected, but they have been connected. And I'd love to
Oh,
talk
yeah.
to you about what have you seen and what do you think about that sort of strangeness and kind of tilting towards fascism and populism as well in the world? In my opinion,
Yeah.
capitalism not working for people and people trying to find an alternate reality that might be helpful, but actually it's not. So what do you think about
Yeah.
that?
Well, I mean, somebody said, I don't know whose quote it is, but somebody said, conspiracism is a poor man's Marxism. Right? Like conspiracism is the Marxism of the poor, or
Mhm.
the dumb in many ways. And I think that kind of like very much sums that pipeline that started happening around COVID, where a lot of people started awakening to the fact that, like you said, that capitalism wasn't really working for a lot of people. But then there's this cooptation, whereas the reason why this quote strikes, I think, for me at least, as true, because by the end of the day, conspiracism is able in many ways to assess the problem pretty much right? Like there's a group of people at the top who are manipulating in many ways the systems that we rely on for their own benefit, and so on and so forth, which is also one of the main insight of Marxism, for example, right? Like there's the capitalist class who somehow manipulates the systems of production and the systems of consumption for their own gain, while really not really caring about the well-being, or not having the well-being of the people as a primary concern, or secondary or tertiary concern, so on and so forth. So conspiracism kind of like identifies that there's a problem, but conspiracism always ends up working at the service of power, because what it says is that it diverts attention. It says, like, yes, there's a problem, right? But then,
It's them doing it, not
yeah,
us.
but leaving that aside, it always points out exactly to that diversion of responsibility. It's not the system, it's not them. There's like a small group of people conspiring, whether it's the elites, the globalists, you can call it whatever you want. I think during COVID, these things festered and multiplied in all sorts of different ways. I mean, the institutional responses towards the pandemic were strange, because we really hadn't faced such a thing before, which gave a lot of room for people for suspicion. I think there was a lot of mismanagement and mishandling of all sorts of different critical things. I mean, I am a medical anthropologist and I do have some training in epidemiology and all of these things, but I'm far from being an expert in these things. I'm not gonna speak too much about the intricacies of global health during COVID, but I think there were definitely all sorts of reasons why people made suspicious, and I think there were also other people who weaponized those suspicions in a very intended way, right? Like there was a co-optation of that sense of revolt towards institutions in order to channel that not necessarily into the sort of revolution or dissent that would benefit people, but towards the rise of bad actors, bad
Division.
ideologies. Not only division, but like really the like you said before, kind of like just weaponizing that suspicion, dissent, social ebullience towards political movements that were malignant in all sorts of different ways from parts of the world. Healing from was born during this period precisely because of this. I remember more or less, I was in Peru. I was in the jungle in Peru. It was during the first couple of months of COVID. We were locked down in Peru because Peru closed the borders immediately and kept them closed for a very long time. So we were stuck in the jungle for a very long time. And I remember opening the internet one morning and seeing the movie of Mickey Willis, Plandemic. And I saw it on my feed. I saw people commenting on it. I saw people sharing it. And the moment that I opened the post, I knew that this was bad news. I knew that this was maybe not the beginning of something bad, but something that was boiling, that this was already kind of like something that was, the ball was rolling and it was leading nowhere good. And sure enough, I started talking with friends and people that I respected their opinions and views, and seeing how quickly they were being radicalized into not only these anti-establishment stances or suspicions of institutions kind of stances, which are healthy. I mean, I've always been very critical of Western medicine in all sorts of different ways, right? But not of medicine as a whole, but critical of certain aspects of the way that healthcare works in the West and so on. But then those things started becoming widespread and lacking a lot of nuance, like extremely absolutist, like, all doctors want to kill us and all the nurses are working within the system to advance this totalitarian state, and like things that were like, hold on, like let's maybe take a step back and even today, like I think like the repercussions of the weaponization of this popular rise, like realizing that maybe the way that capitalism was working or the way that the institutions that were in place were working wasn't ideal, and like that got weaponized very, very quickly towards these malignant political movements. And I think a lot of that, like one of the things that you mentioned, like this epistemic malware, right? I mean, we saw whole political move. We have presidents in all sorts of different countries right now that built their whole platforms built in with this conspiracist worldview already baked into it. This by no means started with COVID. We saw QAnon, for example, already building up before that. I wasn't super tuned into these things. I didn't really have a reason. I wasn't paying attention to these things, but looking back in hindsight, these things were already ready to burst, and COVID was just kind of like the last domino to fall. But more specific, because we're talking about a healing culture, right? Maybe we were talking before about kind of like more the spiritual aspect of it, like people doing light language and believing in Pleiadians and channeling things, which are pretty harmless as far as beliefs or practices go. I don't really have a problem with people on the internet doing fun. I mean, things that are very scammy, sure, like all of the people doing their Kundalini things through screens and so, I mean, whatever. But at the end of the day, people want to get scammed, they're gonna get scammed. It doesn't matter what they do. There are other things that transcend the idiocracy, the idiosyncrasies of just kind of like weird beliefs, spiritual, whatever, and get into like really much more dangerous territory, which is wellness, in the wellness industry, for example, right? So like healing cultures has many different components. It has, of course, the spiritual component, which is mostly kind of like the evolutions, like all the different evolutions from the new age movements of the 70s, absorbed kind of like the human potential movements of the positive psychology and the transcendental psychology and so on. Nowadays, a big component of healing culture is also the wellness culture that grew out from the same kind of similar Californian subcultures of self-improvement and self-enhancement that became very popular. And of course, conspiracism, which is baked in. Again, like these things are not necessarily different modules. They're kind of like always interconnected. There's many more within healing culture, but these are three that are very easily identifiable in many of the beliefs, many of the discourses, many of the narratives. Lots of the content that we share is like wellness, new agey belief systems, and conspiracist system. And conspiracism, I think, is interesting. Like we were saying before, when I talk about conspiracism, this is oftentimes the most triggering things for a lot of people. Again, because a lot of people who are part of Healing from Healing as spectators or as participants are also in many of these beliefs about conspiracism. So I kind of try to separate. Like when I talk about conspiracism, I'm not talking about conspiracy theories as a whole. I'm not saying like always believe the mainstream narratives and the governments are always telling you the truth and the mainstream media is always giving you the news. I mean, that's bullshit. Everybody knows that. When I talk about conspiracism as opposed to conspiracy theory, is that conspiracism is not a person who believes in a conspiracy theory, but conspiracism is an epistemic framework. Whereas a person starts seeing the world and everything that happens in it through that frame of conspiracism, where nuance doesn't exist anymore, where sociology and anthropology and political science and generations of studies in social sciences just thrown out of the window because none of that matters. All of these people are paid actors, all of these people are crisis actors, all of the corpus of work that was produced by critical theories and so on was just the result of Freemasons or Jews or whatever, and the only thing that really matters is kind of like the conspiracies frame, whereas there's just like this way of looking at everything and making sense of everything, and that way of making sense of everything oftentimes always is very simplistic. Again, because when you strip everything out of nuance, then everything becomes very simplistic. And I think that in many ways that's the appeal, right? Like we don't want complexity, we don't want to spend years understanding sociology or political. We want just the reassurance that somehow somebody can explain to us in very simple terms, oh, like everything is fucked because, or the Jews or the immigrants or whatever. What is that? Islam is the way that I frame it, or that epistemic framework through which a person starts making sense of everything through the lens of conspiracy, and everything else becomes obsolete at best or just another ruse by the globalists at worst. And I think that's kind of like the main danger with conspiracy theories, that people very easily get funneled into that conspiracism that then very easily gets weaponized into malignant, populist, fascist political movements that can then gain power. And it seems that more and more in modern times they can gain power of big important players in this world, and that's a real tragedy and danger.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've seen that in our own work as well at Nectar, as people are looking for healing and meaning mostly. And yet with these experiences, sometimes they do get that luminous experience and they do get these spiritual insights and things of that nature. But ultimately they come back to a world that has been hijacked by capitalism and colonialism. And so what would you say to someone, and I might not have all the answers to share on one show, but I've gotten really good at capitalism and I'm still miserable. Now what? Because we are living in this world, and this 3D world and the 4D world that some people call it, it can be really hard to transition between those two and actually embody these new insights into a world that is, my opinion, is that it's quite a sick world that we live in because of all the system you just talked about. What would you share to that person?
Well, I mean, that way of framing it that I oftentimes use, like I got really good at playing the game of capitalism and I'm still miserable, so now what? It's something that emerged naturally from my own experience facilitating these retreats. I mean, I heard this story so many times in so different ways.
Yeah.
I did get to work with a lot of people who told me variations of that same story, right? Like, I was an entrepreneur, I made a lot of money, I became very successful at this thing that I chose to do, and I found that I was still miserable, and now I'm here at this retreat trying to find out why, or trying to find what is it that's gonna make me happy. So that, like, I made a lot of money, I won at capitalism, I gathered all the chips, and I'm still a miserable fuck, and now what, right? Like, what's next?
And you've shared to them, like, keep an eye inward and keep an eye outward. So yeah, you can acknowledge your own healing and transformation, but also look outside, and you're staying at a retreat that's, around these river basins that's been demolished by oil extraction, and keeping those two things in mind, the collective healing and the personal healing as well.
When I started collecting data for my doctoral dissertation, I started interviewing people, like open structure interviews. I didn't have a battery of questions that I asked everybody. Mostly I wanted to gather the stories of people in their own words. Like, what was it about the whole retreat environment, like the whole retreat structure? Not only the ayahuasca ceremonies themselves, but being here for 10 days, being with a group, being in the rainforest, like being here in their own words. What was it that they found beneficial or most healing or most insightful? And in the beginning, because I was so deep in the ayahuasca work, I thought most of the people will tell me about their ceremonies. And sure, there were a lot of references to ceremony, but very, very quickly I started realizing that there was one thing that was coming up almost in every conversation that I hadn't really considered before. And that was that what most people really found most meaningful wasn't necessarily the experiences that they had with themselves during ceremony, but the experiences that they had with themselves in relation to other participants in the retreat. Right? For example, a person would be like, I came here feeling very depressed, very anxious, and then the ceremony was great, but then the sharing circle was really what brought everything to the surface, because I was able for the first time in my life to share openly about my struggles with a group of strangers. So in the beginning it was very awkward because blah, blah, but then I realized that people were very empathetic, and like that kind of dynamic was that loneliness, that existential loneliness of living life in the late capitalist, whatever. When you get people together into a close group and you give them entheogens or medicines or whatever you want to call them, I don't really have a preferred name, but when they have these shared experiences together and they process those deep emotional experiences together, and you facilitate for them as a facilitator these spaces, well, they get to connect with real vulnerability and real authenticity and share these things openly. Like there's something magical that happens that transcends the psychedelic experience itself and has to do more with the social, relational component of having these experiences and sharing them together and processing them together. And that kind of became the focus of the whole thesis, because I started realizing, well, it's not really the ayahuasca experience itself that is creating this massive transformation, but it's a relational environment, it's the people in them, it's the processing of something that a lot of people, if not most people who come to the jungle have lost. Not only have lost, but they don't really realize that they have lost it until they find it again. Is that sense of real intimacy, of real authenticity, of real connection with others that happens in rare environments nowadays. Like that sense of communitas, that sense of collective effervescence. So that kind of like became the thing. So yes, the connection, the relational aspect of it kind of like became the central component of it, because it was clear to me very early on that was the gold mine that people came to look for, even if they did not know that in the beginning.
The togetherness, the being witnessed and being heard without judgment, to me has been the biggest part of the healing for me in terms of psychedelic work. And to me, it's a form of activism, because being together, again, is really counterculture to what the people at the top who want to divide us are trying to do, which is divide and conquer and make it seem like it's left versus right, when it's really bottom versus top. It's not a political thing. It's actually an income inequality thing and a political inequality thing. And so I think that form of healing and transformation, being together again, is a way to help change the systems, is a way to help change our own disconnection to ourselves and nature, especially. And I think the whole AI thing is not helping us becoming closer to nature. So if you can go outside, touch the grass, and connect with nature once in a while, because that's really what we're all about as humans. Let's close on hope, because when I emailed you, I said, what's alive for you, Adam? You said humor and hope are alive for him. So let's talk about hope. After years of cataloging the stranger parts of the wellness or healing space or the healing culture, what's kept you from going cynical?
Being a parent, I think that's the number one thing. If it wasn't for my daughter, I probably would descend into nihilism or complete cynicism. That would be probably not the best mental state for me, and also not very productive for anything that I would like to achieve in my life. But being a parent kind of like by default already prevents me from doing that, because I can't afford it. I mean, I can't afford it for myself, and I can't afford it for her. I have to practice daily hope. There's many times where I lose it, and it's kind of like difficult to say, because being a father is the best thing that ever happened to me, but also a decision that carries a lot of weight for me in terms of morals, ethics, even sometimes guilt. Like, I mean, it's not very difficult, I think, for I think many parents nowadays probably feel similarly, like saying like, okay, like this is a beautiful experience, but also like, what kind of world am I bringing life into? Like, why am I, like, what kind of responsibility do I have towards my daughter, who is going to grow in a world that I wouldn't like to grow in? I mean, that I don't know what it's going to look like. And that's where hope for me has to be a daily practice. If I get to immerse into news cycles, which happens sometimes, and I feel like all the hope sucked out of me, then I have to come back to some sort of practice that reminds me that I have to have hope. And I think, the way that for me plays out with my daughter is that I have to remind myself oftentimes that not because my imagination is limited to the extent that I can't really imagine a way out of this mess, or I can't really imagine a future that is not like this horrible dystopia, the way that things are headed. That doesn't mean and I have to have hope, and I have to have trust in my daughter that she will bear incredibly heavy responsibility towards herself, towards humanity. Like, her generation is probably going to be the Hail Mary of humanity in all sorts of different ways.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe it's kind of like also like getting into kind of like this narcissistic aspect of like, I have to be the best parent, I have to be the best person to really teach her in the best way possible, because she's going to really have this incredible mission against all odds to make something out of humanity that is not complete dystopia and ecocide and extinction in the end. Which fine. I
Yeah.
mean, when I go to the other extreme, I think extinction is also fine. 99.9% of species are already going extinct. There's nothing in the human DNA that says that we need to be the dominant species forever. But I hope that it doesn't happen within the next few generations, at least, and that
Yeah.
whoever does get to live in the next few generations gets to live a life that is worth living, not in a Sisyphean way of like saying yes to existence no matter what, but in a way that it kind of dignifies being a human, dignifies having like experiencing art and experiencing love and experiencing nature, and not through screens and so on. So my hope is that my imagination may be limited, and my vision of what the future can be like maybe more cynical, but that doesn't mean that those are the only option. And my daughter may, I mean, I speak about my daughter, but obviously I mean the future, like humanity, like all of our children. Will be able to create and imagine things. And maybe going back to the beginning of the conversation, maybe AI is going to be a part of that. Maybe there's going to be a point where it'll heal chronic diseases and it's not going to be weaponized towards creating a permanent underclass. Who knows?
Yeah, dark enlightenment. Yeah, that's sort of the
Right.
vision we want to avoid, that
Right.
dark
So the dark
enlightenment
enlightenment.
vision.
I think there's a lot of accelerationism happening left and right. I think there's a lot of people who are like, again, like a lack of imagination that just drives things towards collapse, because we can't imagine anymore kind of like that gradual betterment of
Well,
systems.
we should talk about sci-fi movies, because I'm just going to put it out there. If you're a writer, please write better sci-fi that is not dystopian. Like, can we start
Right.
imagining better futures together? And that's actually what precedes change, is to imagine a better
Right.
future.
I think this is 100% the time for positive fiction, for imaginative sci-fi, for ideas that kind of like turn the dial of the zeitgeist or feed the egregore. I mean, I'm not anymore much of a manifestation woo-woo kind of guy, but I definitely think that there's something in the collective, you know, what it is that we put out into the collective imaginary definitely has a lot of impact in outcomes. So one of my favorite posts that I've ever written was exactly about why I think that conspiracism stems in big part as a reaction to a lack of good fiction. I think a lot of people read better fiction and they have better ways to practice that imagination. Then we wouldn't need to have not only conspiracism, but kind of like the darker parts of kind of like the new age or whatever. Like, we wouldn't need to drive ourselves towards those fantasies if we had kind of like that outlet of like better or more. I'm gonna revisit that post and maybe create something out of it in long form, because I think that's a good point that you have there.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to read this because I want to get it right, but you quoted something around that if techno-feudalism and looming war and the return of fascism doesn't awaken your sense of purpose, maybe nothing will. Do you actually believe the crisis is a summons to something greater, or is that the hope talking? How do we observe this looming dark enlightenment and not have a sense of awakening purpose around it?
I'm gonna finish in the same way that I would finish talks in the retreat sometimes, which is precisely with what I hope out of all of these different experiences that people were having, right? So like you said, like one eye inwards, one eye outwards. Once people have this awakening of relationality, once these experiences drive as deep as possible into people, the deeper truths of interdependence, right? Of the fact that we're not atoms floating in the ether. We're actually deeply interdependent, interconnected experiences, experiencing each other dependent of each other. Like there's a correlation between everything. Once that lands, then it becomes easier to talk about other things that are equally as important and equally as difficult, such as what you said earlier about the environment, right? It is very difficult for people oftentimes when they arrive to the Amazon rainforest, for example, so engrossed in my own problems and my own psyche and my own personal drama and my own personal, whatever it is that my own life brought me here. And everything is very much into this person. But then through those experiences and through that processing and through these conversations, people start realizing that their own crisis and the environmental crisis are not separate phenomena. They are one and the same phenomenon, just manifesting in different ways. One inwards towards my own psyche, and one's in a collective environmental way. So when people start making that connection, that my own unhappiness, of my own need for meaning within this capitalist machinery, and the fact that the 5 main rivers of the Peruvian Amazon are dead rivers because they're polluted by oil extraction, which is a reality, right? Then there's a bridge that is connected there. Like all of these crises, all of the meta crisis, right? Like this meta crisis becomes a hyper object that is difficult to grasp, but it's there. Like my personal problems and the environmental issues, the social issues, the political issues, the cultural issues. So these things are all interconnected. And then it's easier to kind of like peel those layers and kind of, again, like one eye inward and one eye outward. That's what it means, right? Like I'm keeping one eye inwards into my own process, my own drama, my own personal whatever, my own psychological, psychoanalytical process, so on and so forth. But one eye outwards to like, well, okay, well, I came here because I wasn't happy with these things, but these things have a reason, and these reasons are structural. And what can I do once I come back home? Not only to keep working on myself through personal betterment and personal development and therapy, which are important, but also, right, to address the structures that created this experience for me and that will continue to create these experiences, not only for me, but for everybody else. Then that's when the work really can become relational, in the sense that it's not only self-contained into kind of like this self-absorbed, never-ending loop of consumption, but also something that puts outwards something that is changing structures, or the aims towards that change of structures that can then manifest into like changing cultural realities, changing social momentum, bettering environmental conditions for everybody. And that's where the healing work becomes real, I think.
Yes.
That's where everything manifests into something that is valuable, not only for feeding my own egocentric story or fantasy of personal development and spiritual enlightenment, but something that is tangible in bettering the conditions for everybody else as well. Yes. Always kind of like try to direct people in the retreats, like, hey, you had these experiences, what are you going to do with it now you go back home? And that's hope. That's my hope. My hope is that every person that goes back home after their experiences and their retreats kind of has that insight. We're like, hey, now that I'm back home, what is it that I can do in my immediate environment to change the structures that are making all of us ill?
And to me, service is, to me, the end goal of integration is to be in service and give back and ripple out these things so that we can actually have a better world for everyone. Like no one is free until we're all free, right?
Right.
Last question. Healing from healing. Do you plan ahead for that? Do you have a mapping of where you want it to go? What's next for you?
I'm bored a little bit with it. I have been bored for a while, and I think that also manifests in the frequency that I post and the frequency that I engage with it. I think that for the last year or so, I haven't really been very excited about the current model of it. I feel like I don't really have anything new anymore to add to this conversation. So what I would like to do, I think the next step, taking advantage of all the stuff that I already have here with my wife in particular, who has all the equipment and the know-how and the drive and intuition to do these things, I think I would like to have more conversations with people. I never really saw myself as somebody who has a podcast. I think a Healing from Healing podcast would be maybe a stretch, but maybe a series of conversations with people based precisely on the things that we have discussed today. Like I don't really have any interest anymore in identifying or diagnosing the problems. I think what people are thirsty for are actually hope, solutions, the way forward. What can we do? I mean, we know that everything is fucked, but what is it actually that can give us hope or can give us that drive to move forward? And I think that's right now what the zeitgeist calls for is more oriented towards that, and I think that's the next step. So I already have kind of like a list of maybe 10, 15 people that I've already reached out to that I would love to have this conversation with. Not necessarily like talking about the ills of modern spirituality or wellness, but rather like
What's next?
how do we move this forward?
I think that would be great conversations to have. And for me personally, I would love to write a comedy about psychedelics and the space in general. I think there's something really powerful about that, not just in terms of culture change and transformation, but also to bring these ideas and these amazing characters that are in this space, like amazing characters, like some of my friends and stories I've heard, and people, just really lovely, amazing people, and really different. And I think there's a lot of channels for like storytelling from. So thank you so much for doing all your work. And yeah, we're looking forward to the conversations and the memes when you feel like it.
Yeah, this was great. I haven't really wanted to do anything public for a long time. Same reason. I just felt like I didn't really have anything to say, and I kind of like feel maybe there's some sparks that can still be ignited and some ideas that can be developed. So I thank you also for the platform and the invitation and the conversation.
Yeah, you have a lot to share. Thank you so much for doing everything you do.
Take care.